Salford and Manchester, as two of the boroughs within the wider Greater Manchester conurbation, are in a position to be quite picky now. Actually, investment wants to come into these locations, and both city councils can make demands within reason of developers, and can be quite selective as to who they partner. But first, they have to sort of correct the past really and deal with their existing assets, which are getting in the way. And if you think of a town centre like Oldham, it's not a big town centre. The shopping centre, two shopping centres take up a huge amount of the town centre. Undercover, barrier to movement, and correcting that, dealing with that, and opening it up is not a quick and cheap job.
We need to make sure that we've got access to really accurate, reliable, and current information and data. The more data that we can host in View City, the better, and the more current it is, then even better again. And we're really on a mission to get as much information into the platform as we can. I think historically, when we've looked at data, you're looking through Excel sheets, and it's maybe on just a 2D map and you can't quite work out exactly where that is. So we're really trying to revolutionise that sort of visualisation of data in a 3D environment.
A joint platform that melds as far as we can what developers are after and what the council's after. And we know loads of developers want similar things. I think in terms of building that vision, I think we talked about the first point of vision for GM, it's about knowing how you're going to get there as well as where you want to get to. And that feels like a real challenge for councils. Over the next 15 years, it's turning strategy isn't a destination, it's the journey to get there that's the key thing.
Often town centres, some town centres are actually footfall-wise better than they were pre-pandemic, which, is brilliant. However, the shopping centres are 98% full in some cases. However, the rent roll that goes with it doesn't reflect that. And we're actually seeing an uplift in requirements for town centres now because they have remodelled and they've got a clear business plan now. Between the Greater Manchester Authority working together and local authorities saying, right, okay, how can we fix this problem?
And I think we're seeing it in Stockport, and Stockport's always been ahead, I think. And I think a lot of that is to do with the strong local authority drive that you've got with the likes of the MDC, which obviously Andy Burnham's behind and is being headed up. But I was at Stockport in one of the cafes today by the station, looking around. They've got all the deck chairs out, people sat on the grass, beach balls, having drinks, all the offices that are going up, and you just go, this is Stockport.
We're seeing real push from our invested partners to expand within the city centre, and also, with Andrew will know well, that with the sort of explosion more recently in the life science sectors that have pushed on, and a demand for that occupier demand that's come in city centre. Manchester has created itself as a sort of global city now, as we're all aware. And on the life sciences side, not just looking at Oxford and Cambridge, not just looking at Boston, they are looking at the key cities with Manchester and the attractiveness around the student retention, the great universities we have here.
I think really what you want is engagement from the people, the various stakeholders, residents, whatever they might be in certain areas. And so to be able to provide them with as much information as possible, get the feedback from them that can help places develop in a sustainable way that is useful for those people, then giving them access to as much information as possible can only be a good thing. Getting that feedback, giving them as much as possible, that helps build in, even early on in the development of an area, the key principles that are going to help that develop in a way that is useful to everyone can only be helpful for that.
I think, when we look at trying to make the city sustainable, I suppose it's all part of that bigger picture about sustainability, broad sustainability, and that idea of walkable, navigable neighbourhoods, really. And it's not the first example of its kind, but in something like Great Jackson Street, suddenly there's a neighbourhood there with up to 12,000 homes in there, and growing, and it's right on the edge of a city core. There's probably not many cities where something like that actually happens, really. I think that the values are there in Manchester at this particular point. There are certainly the sites in this kind of outer edge, and obviously a willingness for something like that to happen.
And really what I've heard today is very much on, the more data, the better, listening to local communities and incorporating that as part of design. But really that collaboration piece, and it sounds actually in the north and in Manchester that's probably working maybe a little bit better than a lot of places across the UK.